The silence of the Velos system broke at 0400 hours. There was no warning. The auger arrays on the moon of Velos Prime simply turned red. A gravity wave the size of a solar system washed over the planet. It was not a natural event. It was the displacement of 1 billion tons of scrap metal forcing its way out of the warp. The sky over the mining colony turned a sickly green. The clouds parted. Through the gap, massive asteroids descended. They were burning. They were not meteors. They were rocks. Ork attack ships. Retro thrusters fired with the force of nuclear bombs, slowing the descent of the stone fortresses. The ground shook as the first rock made landfall. It crushed the northern mountain range. Dust filled the atmosphere, choking the sun. Sergeant Kale of the Tempest Templars stood on the battlements of Fortress Alpha. He removed his helmet. He took a deep breath of the filtered air. 10 years ago, he would have been screaming litanies of hate. He would have been charging the landing zone with a chainsword, eager to die for the Emperor. Now, he felt a cold knot in his stomach. He felt fear. He remembered the lessons of Chancellor Rimuru. Fear is information. Fear tells you where the danger is. He looked at his squad. They were former neophytes. They looked to him for orders. They did not want to die. They wanted to protect the people hiding in the bunkers below. Kale activated his Vox. He spoke calmly. He ordered the heavy bolter teams to target the ramps of the rock. He did not ask for a glorious death. He asked for suppressive fire. The ramps of the Ork fortress slammed down. The roar began. It was a sound that drowned out the thunder. Wah! A tide of green muscle and iron poured out. Thousands of Ork boys charged. They rode war bikes that spewed black smoke. They fired crude solid slug pistols into the air. Leading them was a knob the size of a dreadnought. He wore armor made from the hull of a destroyed Imperial cruiser. He laughed as he ran. The Tempest Templars opened fire. Their aim was perfect. They did not waste shots. Blue plasma, enhanced by the Federation's new technology, burned holes in the green tide. But for every Ork that fell, 3 more climbed over the body. The sheer weight of numbers was impossible to stop. On Griffin 4, deep in the newly christened Tempest Spire, Rimuru Tempest opened his eyes. He was in the middle of a budget meeting. He felt the disturbance in his soul corridor. He had connected his magicules to the defense grid of every planet in his territory. When Velos Prime was hit, Rimuru felt the impact like a punch to the gut. He stood up. The table cracked under his hand. General Hesh and High Marshal Helbrecht stopped talking. They looked at their lord. Rimuru's eyes were not golden. They were flashing red. He did not need a report. Seal, the voice in his head, was already feeding him the data. Report. Invasion force detected in Sector 7. Species, Orks. Fleet strength. Classification Vermilion. This is not a raiding party. Seal's voice was calm, but the information was catastrophic. The Orks were migrating. They were leaving the Octarius War. They were ignoring the Tyranids. They were coming here. Rimuru walked to the window. He looked at the peaceful city below. He saw the schools he had built. He saw the factories making tractors instead of tanks. He realized his mistake. He had made his territory too interesting. He had made it shine too brightly. In the darkness of the 41st millennium, a light does not attract friends. It attracts predators. The strategic map on the wall flickered. The green icons of the Ork fleet were not just at Velos. They were jumping into 3 other systems. This was a sector-wide invasion. Helbrecht looked at the map. His face went pale. He recognized the pattern. This was a WAAAGH, aimed specifically at a single champion. The Orks wanted to fight the strongest thing in the galaxy. And right now, the rumors said the strongest thing was the blue slime. Rimuru sighed. He put on his mask. The peace was over. The era of the WAAAGH had begun. And the worst part was not the orcs. The worst part was what the orcs were leaving behind. By leaving Octarius, they had left the Tyranid Hive Fleet there with no one to fight. The Tyranids would eat Octarius, grow stronger, and then they would look for dessert. Rimuru realized he had to fight two apocalypses at once. The mobilization of the Tempest Federation was not like the clumsy awakening of an Imperial crusade. There were no long prayers to the machine god to start the engines. There were no whipping of thralls to load the macro cannons. The city of Ethelgard on Griffin 4 shifted gears instantly. The civilian factories stopped making tractors. The nanolathing vats switched to ammunition production. Rimuru stood on the bridge of his flagship, the newly christened Star of Tempest. It was a hybrid vessel. It had the armored prow of an Imperial battleship, but the sleek engines of a sleek cruiser. It did not burn promethium. It burned magicals stored in massive crystal batteries. High Marshal Helbrecht stood beside Rimuru. He wore his new armor. It was silver, trimmed with the blue of the Federation. He held his helmet under his arm. His face was grim. He looked at the tactical display of the Velos system. The red dots of the Ork fleet were swarming around the planet. They moved without formation. They moved with a chaotic hunger. Helbrecht explained the enemy to Rimuru. He said that orcs are not evil in the way chaos is evil. Chaos hates. Orcs just want to have fun. And for an orc, war is the only fun that exists. This made them dangerous. You cannot reason with a creature that loves being shot at. Rimuru nodded. He spoke to Seal in his mind. He asked for a probability of diplomatic solution. Seal replied instantly. The probability was 0. The orcs of the 41st Millennium had degraded. There were bioweapons left on autopilot for 60 million years. Their programming was broken. They only understood violence. Rimuru sighed. He hated wasted effort. He hated fighting without a goal. But he knew he had to protect his people. He ordered the fleet to jump. The Star of Tempest engaged its warp drive. It did not tear a hole in reality like Imperial ships. It used a calculated slip-space jump, a technique Ciel had derived from Necron technology schematics found in the Mechanicus archives. The fleet vanished. In an instant, they were in the Velos system. The battle over the planet was a slaughter. The planetary defense force was gone. The orbital stations were burning wrecks. The Ork rocks were dropping onto the surface like stones. Rimuru ordered the Tempest Templars to drop. He told them to prioritize the civilian bunkers. He did not want them to hunt the orcs. He wanted them to shield the humans. The drop pods launched. They were painted blue and silver. Inside, the Astartes were calm. They did not scream battle cries. They checked their weapons. They were professionals. They were the scalpel, not the hammer. On the surface, Sergeant Kale watched the sky. He was bleeding from a head wound. His armor was dented. His bolter was empty. He had resorted to using his combat knife. The orc knob he was fighting was huge. It swung a jagged axe. Kale dodged. He was tired. He had been fighting for 6 hours. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of roasting fungus. The civilians behind him were screaming. The blast door to the bunker was buckling. The orcs were welding it shut to trap them inside. Then the sky opened up. The Tempest drop pods slammed into the orc lines. The impact threw the greenskins into the air. The doors blew open. A squad of Terminators walked out. They were massive. They carried storm shields that glowed with blue energy. They formed a wall between Kyle and the orcs. The knob charged the wall. He hit a shield. There was a crack of thunder. The knob broke his arm. The Terminator did not move. He raised his thunder hammer. He brought it down. The knob was flattened. Kale slumped against a rock. He watched the Terminators advance. They moved with a fluidity that shouldn't be possible for such heavy armor. This was the work of the slime lubricants and the muscle fiber enhancements Rimuru had designed. They were faster than standard Astartes. They pushed the orcs back. Carl looked at his hands. They were shaking. He drank from his canteen. The water was warm and tasted like ash. This was the reality of war. Even with a god on your side, the dust still gets in your lungs. Rimuru did not stay on the ship. He teleported to the surface. He appeared on the highest peak of the crushed mountain range. He looked down at the battlefield. It was a mess. Millions of orcs were swarming the valleys. They were fighting the Templars, but they were also fighting each other. They were fighting rocks. They were fighting the local wildlife. Rimuru extended his hand. He needed to clear the board. He used Megiddo, but he modified it. He did not want to kill the planet. He aimed the water lasers with surgical precision. Thousands of beams of light rained down. They hit the engines of the orc trucks. They hit the ammunition piles. They hit the fuel tanks. Across the valley, a chain reaction of explosions bloomed. The orcs cheered. They loved the explosions. They did not care that they were dying. They thought it was a great light show. This confused Rimuru. In his old world, enemies ran when they were losing. These creatures ran toward the fire. Seal analyzed the behavior. She explained that the WAAAGH field generated by the orcs warped reality slightly. It made their vehicles work when they shouldn't. It made them tougher when they believed they were winning. To defeat them, Rimuru had to break their belief. He had to show them that they were not having fun. Rimuru flew down to the main orc camp. It was a city of scrap metal built in hours. In the center sat the war boss. He was known as Killfist the Render. He was 20 feet tall. He wore the skull of a Tyranid Carnifex as a helmet. He saw the small blue boy land in his camp. Killfist laughed. The sound was like tectonic plates grinding. He pointed his power claw at Rimuru. He shouted that he would squish the blue grot. Rimuru didn't move. He let the war boss charge. The ground shook with every step. The other orcs stopped fighting to watch. They made a circle. This was the ritual. The boss fights the challenger. Killfist swung his claw. It was powered by dirty fusion generators. It could cut a titan leg. Rimuru caught it with one finger. The impact created a shockwave that blew the tent away. Killfist stopped. His small red eyes went wide. He pushed with all the strength of the WAAAGH. Rimuru did not budge. "Is that it?" Rimuru asked. His voice was amplified so every orc could hear. "I thought you were strong." Killfist roared in anger. He swung his other hand. It held a shooter that fired explosive rivets. He pulled the trigger. The gun exploded in his hand. Rimuru had used matter manipulation to fuse the barrel shut. Killfist looked at his mangled hand. He looked at Rimuru. He did not feel fear. He felt confusion. Rimuru jumped. He kicked the warboss in the chin. It was a simple kick, but it carried the weight of a starship. Killfist flew backward. He flew through 3 scrap towers. He landed in a crater. He did not get up. He was unconscious. The battlefield went silent. The orcs looked at their fallen boss. They looked at Rimuru. Rimuru expected them to run. He expected them to surrender. Instead, a low chant began. It started with 1 orc, then 10, then 10,000. Blue, blue, blue. They were cheering for him. They were chanting his color. Seal alerted Rimuru. Notice, enemy logic has reconfigured. By defeating the warboss with physical strength, You have satisfied the criteria for leadership. They now view you as the biggest knob. Rimuru slapped his forehead. This was the worst possible outcome. He didn't want to be an Ork war boss. He wanted them to leave. Listen to me, Rimuru shouted. I am not your boss. Go home. The Orks laughed. They thought he was making a joke. The biggest Ork is always the boss, and the boss tells them where the fight is. If the boss says, go home, it must mean, go home and fight the things there. Suddenly, the sky turned purple. A tear in the warp opened above the valley. It was a Weird Boy tower, a tower of copper and bone that channeled psychic energy. The Weird Boy atop the tower was convulsing. He was channeling the excitement of the WAAAGH. Green lightning arced from his eyes. He screamed a prophecy. He screamed that the green god Gork was watching. He screamed that the great devourer was coming. The rift widened. It was not a stable gate. It was a wound. From the rift, a massive object fell. It was a space hulk, a conglomeration of wrecked ships fused together in the warp. It crashed into the southern continent of Velos Prime. The impact caused an earthquake that registered magnitude 9. The dust cloud thickened. Rimuru flew up to inspect the crash. Seal scanned the hulk. It was ancient. It contained ships from the dark age of technology, Eldar cruisers and Ork rocks. But inside, it was full of life signals, not Ork signals. Alert, Seal said. Genestealer infestation detected. Pure strain levels. The hulk is a carrier vessel. Rimuru realized the trap. The Orks had brought the Tyranids with them, not on purpose, but the spores were on their ships. The Genestealers were hiding in the scrap. By coming to Velos, the Orks had delivered a biological bomb to the Tempest Federation. Helbrecht contacted Rimuru on the Vox. Lord Rimuru, the hulk. It is leaking biomass. The Tyranids are waking up. I see them, Rimuru said. The Orks are fighting them. Below, the Orks had forgotten about Rimuru. They saw the new enemies pouring from the space hulk. Genestealers, fast and deadly, were rushing the Ork lines. The Orks howled with joy. A new enemy, a new scrap. They charged the Tyranids. Green muscle met purple chitin. It was a meat grinder. Rimuru hovered in the air. He had a headache. He had come to stop an invasion. Now he was watching a war between two monsters on his front lawn. If he destroyed the Orks, the Tyranids would spread. If he destroyed the Tyranids, the Orks would get bored and attack the city again. He needed them to destroy each other, but he needed to contain the damage. He flew back to the command center he had established on the ridge. Sergeant Kale was there. He was getting his head bandaged by a medic. The medic was using a slime-based gel that closed the wound in seconds. Kale stood up and saluted. Sit down, Rimuru said. Status of the civilians? 70% secured, Kale said. But the mines are collapsing. The earthquake destabilized the tunnels. We have 5,000 people trapped in Sector 4. Sector 4 is right next to the space hulk, Rimuru said. Yes, sir, Kale said. The Tyranids will be there in an hour. Rimuru looked at Helbrecht. We need to get them out. Now. The teleporters are scrambled by the WAAAGH energy, Helbrecht said. We have to go in on foot, or tread. Prepare the land raiders, Rimuru ordered. I'll lead the spearhead. No, Helbrecht said. He stepped forward. You must manage the fleet. If the Ork ships in orbit drop more rocks, the planet cracks. Let me take the ground. Let me save them. Rimuru looked at the High Marshal. He saw the determination. This was Helbrecht's redemption. He wanted to save lives to make up for the lives he had taken in his past crusades. Okay, Rimuru said. Take the Wolf Guard. Take Runga. Runga emerged from Rimuru's shadow. The giant Tempest Wolf bowed. I will guard him, Master. Helbrecht and Runga boarded a Thunderhawk gunship. They flew toward the crash site. Rimuru teleported back to his ship. He had to deal with the Void War. The battle in space was chaotic. The Ork ships were ramming the Federation ships. They didn't care about shields. They used boarding torpedoes. Rimuru sat in the captain's chair. He connected his mind to the ship's computer. Seal, initiate fire control link. Affirmative, Seal replied. Rimuru became the ship. He felt the sensors as his eyes. He felt the engines as his legs. He saw the trajectory of every torpedo. He saw the weak points of every Ork kill cruiser. All batteries, Rimuru commanded. Pattern Delta. Target their engines. Leave them drifting. The Star of Tempest fired. It fired beams of concentrated magicules. The shots were impossible. They curved in the void. They bypassed the thick frontal armor of the Orks and hit the volatile fuel tanks at the rear. One by one, the Ork ships lost power. They didn't explode. They just stopped moving. But the Orks didn't stop. They put on spacesuits, which were just fishbowls taped to their armor, and jumped out of the airlocks. They tried to board the Federation ships by flying through the void with rocket packs. It was insanity. It was magnificent. Rimuru had to admire their dedication. He ordered the point defense turrets to intercept. The space around Velos became a fireworks display of flak and broken Ork bodies. Back on the surface, Helbrecht landed near the mines. The scene was a nightmare. The Tyranids had breached the outer perimeter. Hormagaunts were flooding the trench lines. The Tempest Templars were holding them back with flamers. The fire turned the night into day. Helbrecht drew his sword. It hummed with the violet energy of the Tempest. "Push them back," he roared. "For the Chancellor, for humanity." He charged. Runga ran beside him. Runga unleashed chain lightning that fried the gaunts in dozens. Helbrecht fought with a cold precision. He cut the legs off the Tyranids. He didn't waste energy on kill shots if a disable was faster. He carved a path to the mine entrance. Inside the mine, the civilians were huddled in the dark. The air scrubbers had failed. They were breathing dust. A young girl coughed. She held a piece of scrap metal as a weapon. She heard the screaming outside. She thought the monsters were coming in. Then the blast door hissed. Sparks flew. Someone was cutting it open. The girl gripped her metal shard. The door fell inward. A giant figure stood in the smoke. He had glowing blue eyes. He wore silver armor. Is it an angel?" the girl whispered. Helbrecht knelt. He took off his helmet. His face was scarred, but his eyes were kind. "No," he said. "I am just a soldier, and I am here to take you home." He lifted the girl. He carried her out. The Templars formed a protective square around the civilians. They moved through the hellscape. On one side, Orks chopped at Tyranids. On the other, Tyranids ate Orks. In the middle, the thin line of blue and silver walked, carrying the weak. This was the new doctrine of the Tempest Federation. Life was the currency, and they spent their ammo to save the currency. But the galaxy does not let good deeds go unpunished. As the convoy reached the extraction zone, the ground erupted. A Morlock, a massive worm beast, burst from beneath the refugees. It swallowed a transport truck whole. 50 people died in an instant. Helbrecht screamed. It was a scream of pure grief. He leapt at the Morlock. He drove his sword into its eye. The beast thrashed. It slammed Helbrecht into the ground. His armor cracked. Runga bit the beast's neck, tearing out a chunk of flesh. Rimuru felt Helbrecht's pain through the soul corridor. He felt the loss of the 50 souls. He was on the bridge of his ship. He gripped the armrest. "They just keep taking," Rimuru whispered. "They just keep taking my people." "Alert," Seal said. "Emotional stress levels rising. Advice, do not lose control. Strategic integrity required. I know, Rimuru said. I know. He took a deep breath. He suppressed his rage. He had to be the leader. He couldn't just go down there and nuke the planet. That would kill the people Helbrecht was trying to save. Deploy the automata, Rimuru ordered. From the cargo bays of the Federation fleet, thousands of metal soldiers dropped. They were not living beings. They were golems made of adamantium, powered by spirits. They did not have souls to eat. They did not have biomass to consume. They were the perfect counter to the Tyranids. The automata landed on Velos Prime. They marched into the Morlock. They tore it apart with mechanical hands. They formed a wall of steel around the refugees. The Tyranids broke their teeth on the adamantium. The Orks hit them with axes, and the axes shattered. Helbrecht was pulled from the wreckage. He was bleeding, but alive. He looked at the metal soldiers. He nodded. Help had arrived. The extraction continued. It took 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting. 3 days of holding the line against 2 infinite armies. By the end, Velos Prime was a wasteland. The mountains were flat. The oceans were evaporated by orbital fire. But the people were safe. Rimuru stood on the bridge of the Star of Tempest as the last transport left the surface. He looked at the dying world. He had won the battle, but the war was just starting. The Orks were still there. They were fighting the Tyranids on the dead planet. It had become a training ground, a never-ending war zone, and from that war zone, the survivors would emerge stronger. Seal presented a new report. Analysis. The WAAAGH energy is reacting with the hive mind synapse. A hybrid signal is being broadcast. Hybrid? Rimuru asked. What does that mean? It means, Seal said, that the Orks are learning from the Tyranids, and the Tyranids are learning from the Orks. We have created a crucible. Rimuru rubbed his temples. He had saved the people, but he had created a monster factory. He marked Velos Prime as a quarantine zone. He ordered a blockade. No ship goes in, no ship comes out. But he knew blockades don't last forever. Back on Griffin 4, the mood was somber. The refugees were processed. They were given food and medical care, but they were traumatized. They had seen the galaxy's true face. Rimuru went to the hospital wing. He visited the girl Helbrecht had saved. She was sleeping. She clutched a small blue slime doll that the nurses had given her. Rimuru touched her forehead. He gave her a small blessing, a protection against nightmares. He walked out to the balcony. Helbrecht was there. He was looking at the stars. We saved them, Helbrecht said. Most of them, Rimuru corrected. We lost 5,000. In the Imperium, Helbrecht said. We would have exterminatused the planet the moment the Space Hulk landed. We would have killed them all to kill the enemy. You saved 90%. That is a victory. It doesn't feel like one, Rimuru said. It never does, Helbrecht said. That is the burden of command. Rimuru looked at his hands. I need to get stronger. My fleet is too slow. My soldiers are too few. If the main Hive Fleet comes, or if Gazkul comes, we lose. Then we build, Helbrecht said. We build faster. No, Rimuru said. We don't just build, we recruit. He looked at the star map. He looked at a sector nearby. The Tau Empire. The Tau, Rimuru said. They like technology. They like the greater good. Maybe they will listen. They are naive, Helbrecht said. They trust too easily. Like me, Rimuru said with a sad smile. No, Helbrecht said. You trust, but you carry a big sword. They just trust. Then maybe I need to teach them how to use a sword, Rimuru said. The expansion ended with a new plan. The Federation could not stand alone. The Imperium was hostile. Chaos was hostile. The orcs and Tyranids were forces of nature. The only potential allies were the other outcasts, the Tau, the Eldar. Rimuru decided to send an envoy, not a soldier, a diplomat. He chose Shion. Wait, Helbrecht said. Shion? The one who cooks poison? She has improved, Rimuru lied. And she is persuasive. In truth, Rimuru sent Shion because he knew the Tau respected martial prowess, and Shion was a one-woman army. If negotiations failed, she could fight her way out. The Star of Tempest turned its sensors toward the Damocles Gulf. A new chapter was opening. The slime was going to meet the blueberries, and the galaxy held its breath, wondering what kind of unholy alliance would be born from the meeting of magic and railguns. The diplomatically requisitioned frigate Purple Empress dropped out of warp space on the edge of the Viorila Sept. It was a Federation ship, painted in the deep violet of Shion's livery. It did not use the aggressive deceleration of Imperial ships. It glided into real space with the grace of a predator entering a clearing. Shion stood on the bridge. She wore her business suit, which looked suspiciously like a modified military uniform. She held a clipboard. She was trying to look like a secretary. She failed. The massive claymore strapped to her back gave her away. The Tau orbital defense grid locked onto her ship. A dozen railgun platforms tracked her trajectory. The Tau were cautious. They had expanded aggressively into this sector, and they were used to Imperial retribution. But this ship was not a Gothic brick. It was sleek. It confused their senses. A hail opened. A face appeared on the screen. It was flat, blue-skinned, with no nose. A water-cast diplomat. He smiled. It was a polite, calculated smile. He welcomed the guest to the greater good. He asked for her caste and her purpose. Shion adjusted her glasses. She said she was the first secretary of the Jura Tempest Federation. She said she came to talk about friendship. The diplomat, poor Malka, was intrigued. The Tau Empire was always looking for new client races. They had heard rumors of the Blue Miracle in the Griffin sector. They assumed it was a new alien empire ripe for assimilation. They granted permission to dock at the orbital station Unity's Light. Shion ordered her pilot, a goblin named Gobta, who was surprisingly good at void navigation, to bring them in gently. Gobta was nervous. He didn't like the look of the railguns. He muttered that they looked like they could punch a hole in a mountain. Shion told him to relax. She said if they shot, she would cut the bullets. The docking bay was clean. It was white and orange. Everything was smooth. There were no skulls. There were no cables hanging from the ceiling. Drones hovered in the air, scanning Shion and her small retinue of hobgoblins. A squad of fire warriors stood at attention. They held pulse rifles. They looked like toys compared to the bolters Shion was used to seeing on Helbrecht's men. Poor Malka walked forward. He bowed. He spoke in perfect low Gothic. He said he was honored. He invited Shion to a negotiation room. The room was circular. It had a floating table. Poor Malka offered Shion a drink. It was a blue nutrient paste. Shion smelled it. It smelled like chemicals. She politely declined. She put a bottle of Tempest brandy on the table. She said this was a gift from her lord. Poor Malka looked at the bottle with suspicion. The Tau do not indulge in intoxicants heavily. It dulls the mind. It hurts the greater good. But he accepted it. We have observed your federation, poor Malka said. You have efficient logistics. You have high resource output. You have pacified the humans. This is commendable. We just want everyone to be happy, Shion said. Rimuru-sama says that fighting is a waste of time. Agreed, poor Malka said. That is why you must join us. Under the guidance of the Ethereals, your federation can become a sept. We will teach you technology. We will teach you the philosophy of the Tauva, You will abandon your superstitious magic and embrace science. Cheyonne's eyebrow twitched. Abandon magic? But magic is useful. It is unstable, Bormalka said. It is unscientific. The ethereals have determined that psychic phenomena are a disease of the mind. We have dampeners. We can cure you. Cheyonne squeezed the edge of the floating table. The metal groaned. We don't need curing. We are here to offer an alliance. Equals. Partners. Bormalka smiled that condescending smile again. There are no equals to the greater good. There is only the path forward, or the path backward. You are currently backward, but we can help you. Cheyonne was about to flip the table. She was about to introduce Bormalka to the concept of blunt force trauma. But then the alarms went off. It was not a drill. The lights turned red. A klaxon wailed. Incursion, a drone voice announced. Warp signature detected. Class terminus. Bormalka looked at his datapad. His composure cracked. Impossible. The Geller field stabilizers were active. How did they bypass the perimeter? Cheyonne stood up. She felt it. The air in the room grew heavy. It smelled of rotting flowers and old blood. It was a smell she knew from the fight in Ethelgard. It was the smell of Nurgle. They didn't bypass it, Cheyonne said. They rotted it. Outside the station, the void tore open like an infected wound. 3 ships emerged. They were ancient cruisers, bloated and rusted. They dripped green ichor into the vacuum of space. They were the Death Guard. The flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a coffin, launched boarding torpedoes. These were not metal pods. They were fleshy cysts fired from biocannons. They slammed into the white hull of Unity's light. The torpedoes burst open. Plague Marines poured out. They were giants in power armor that was fused with their own flesh. They carried bolters that fired explosive rounds filled with viral strains. They carried plague knives dripping with tetanus. They did not run. They walked. They counted 7 steps, then fired. 7 steps, then fired. The fire warriors in the docking bay opened fire. Their pulse rifles were powerful. The plasma bolts hit the Plague Marines. They burned holes in the armor. They blew off arms. But the Marines did not stop. A Marine with no arm just kept walking, laughing a wet, gurgling laugh. He raised his bolter with his remaining hand and blew a fire warrior apart. The Tau were terrified. Their science said that if you destroy the heart, the target dies. These targets did not care about biology. Cheyonne ran to the window. She saw the invasion. "Gobta, get the ship ready," she shouted into her Vox. "I can't," Gobta screamed back. "The docking clamps are rusted shut. There is slime everywhere." Bormalka was trembling. "This is illogical. They do not react to pain. What are they?" "They are the Death Guard," Cheyonne said. "And your science class is cancelled. It's time for gym class." Cheyonne drew Hercules' edge. The massive sword hummed. She kicked the door down. She ran toward the docking bay. Bormalka followed her. He had no weapon. He had only his drone. He recorded everything. He needed to understand. Cheyonne arrived at the main concourse. It was a slaughterhouse. The fire warriors were dying. A greenish fog was filling the air. It was the destroyer plague. Tau who breathed it fell to their knees, coughing up their own lungs. The drones malfunctioned, their circuitry corroded by the supernatural rust. A plague champion stood in the center of the hall. He held a man-reaper, a giant scythe. He was covered in flies. He looked at the Tau. "Despair," the champion wheezed. "Grandfather Nurgle brings you gifts. Why do you resist his love?" He swung the scythe. He cut a battlesuit in half. The pilot inside screamed as he dissolved into sludge. Cheyonne charged. She did not use tactics. She used velocity. She leaped over a squad of dying fire warriors. She swung her sword. Cooking skill. Filet, Shan shouted. The blade hit the blade champion. The champion raised his scythe to block. The impact shattered the scythe. Cheyon's sword cut through the rusted power armor. It cut through the mutated flesh. It cut through the demon inside. The champion looked surprised. His top half slid off his bottom half. That is not science, the champion gurgled before he turned into black ash. The other plague marines turned. They saw the woman with the horn. They saw the purple aura. They stopped counting. They recognized this energy. It was the same energy that had denied them on Ethelgard. The witch, one marine said. The anathema's rival. They opened fire on Shaun. Bolter rounds exploded around her. Xion spun her sword. She deflected the shells. She moved faster than they could track. She was a hurricane of violence. She cut off heads. She severed limbs. But for every marine she killed, the fog grew thicker. The disease was airborne. Xion felt her skin itch. She felt her throat close up. Notice, a voice said in her head. It was not Seal. It was her own unique skill. Cook, foreign biological agent detected. Attempting to rewrite reality. Result, agent classified as bad ingredient. Action, remove. Xion's aura flared. The purple light burned the fog away. She was imposing her own law on reality. The law that said, Shaun does not get sick. The plague marines were confused. Their gifts were being rejected. Paul Malka watched from behind a crate. His drone was analyzing the energy readings. Reality manipulation, the drone whispered. Probability violation. This entity is rewriting the laws of physics locally. Paul Malka felt a chill. The Tau believed in the greater good, a philosophy of unity. This woman represented the greater self, the power of a single will to deny the universe. It was terrifying, but it was saving them. The battle raged for an hour. The station was falling apart. The Death Guard had corrupted the reactor. They were turning the station into a plague bomb. If it exploded, it would infect the planet below. Xion stood on a pile of dead marines. She was panting. Her suit was torn. She had a cut on her forehead, but she was smiling. Is that all? She shouted. Then the floor melted. A massive shape rose from the reactor pit. It was a great unclean one, a greater demon of Nurgle. It was a mountain of flab and rot. It held a rusty sword the size of a building. It laughed, a deep, belly-shaking laugh that cracked the viewports. Little girl, the demon boomed. You are spicy. Grandfather wants to taste you. The demon swung its sword. Xion blocked. The weight drove her to her knees. The floor buckled. The corrosion from the blade began to eat her sword. Hercules's edge chipped. Xion, Gopta's voice came over the vox. We are free. We can leave. Get to the ship. No, Shan gritted her teeth. She pushed back against the giant sword. If we leave, these blue people die. They were rude to us, Gopta argued. They are Rimuru-sama's future friends, Xion yelled. And Rimuru-sama protects his friends. She pushed the demon back. She jumped back. She needed a plan. She couldn't kill a greater demon alone. She needed help. Hey, blue guy, Xion yelled at Poor Malka. Do you have any big guns? Poor Malka looked at his datapad. The station's main railgun is operational, but it is aimed at the void. We cannot fire it inside. Aim it at me, Xion ordered. That is suicide, Poor Malka said. Just do it, Xion screamed. Poor Malka overrode the safety protocols. He rotated the internal magnetic rails. The massive turret in the ceiling turned. It aimed at the reactor pit, at Shan and the demon. Charging, Poor Malka said. Fire in 3 seconds. Xion looked at the great unclean one. Hey, ugly, eat this. She activated her unique skill, Chef, but she didn't use it on an enemy. She used it on herself. She rewrote the concept of her own body. She turned herself into a conductor. The railgun fired. A hypervelocity slug made of tungsten slammed into Shion's back. It should have vaporized her. Instead, Shion caught the kinetic energy. She absorbed the momentum. Her body glowed white hot. She became a living bullet. She launched herself at the demon. She released all the energy in one slash. Tempest style, railgun slash. The beam of light cut through the demon's stomach. It cut through the reactor. It cut through the bottom of the station. It punched a hole straight through the monster. The great unclean one looked down at the hole in its belly. "Oh," it said, "that stings." The demon dissolved. It turned into a pool of sludge that drained out into space. The threat was gone. But the station was critically damaged. It was venting atmosphere. Gravity failed. Shan floated in the zero-G. She was unconscious. Her energy was spent. Poor Malka grabbed her leg. He activated his mag boots. He dragged her to the airlock. They made it to the Purple Empress just as the station's hull collapsed. The frigate pulled away. The station exploded in a silent puff of green gas and debris. The Death Guard ships saw their champion fall. They calculated the loss. They decided the experiment was over. They turned slowly and translated back into the warp. They were patient. They would try again. On the bridge of the Purple Empress, Shion woke up. She was lying on a medical bed. Gopta was eating an apple nearby. Poor Malka was standing there, staring at her. "You destroyed our station," poor Malka said. "I saved your planet," Shion groaned. She sat up. "Where is my brandy?" "The bottle was lost," poor Malka said. "But I have analyzed the chemical residue on your sword. It is illogical, but it is effective." "So, are we friends now?" Shion asked. Poor Malka paused. He thought about the ethereals. He thought about the greater good. He realized that the greater good had no answer for a great unclean one. But this woman did. "We are allies," poor Malka said. "For now, I must report this to the Ethereal High Council. They will want to meet your Rimuru." Shion smiled. "Good. He's much nicer than me." Back on Griffin the 4, Rimuru received the report. He sat in his office. Seal projected the battle data. "She destroyed a space station," Rimuru sighed. "Why does she always break things?" "Correction," Shill said. "She demonstrated superior firepower. The Tau respect firepower. Negotiations have advanced from hostile to curious. This is a strategic victory." "And the Death Guard?" Rimuru asked. "Analysis," Seal said. "The Death Guard were testing us. They have confirmed that our skills can counter their plagues. This will make them cautious, but it will also make Nurgle obsessed. He loves new diseases, and he hates cures." Rimuru looked at the map. The Tau Empire was to the east. The Imperium was to the west. The Tyranids were to the south. And now Nurgle was knocking on the door. "We are surrounded," Rimuru said. "We are in a target-rich environment," Helbrecht said, walking into the room. He had returned from Velos. He looked tired but strong. "How are the refugees?" Rimuru asked. "Settled," Helbrecht said. "But we have a new problem. A Mechanicus Explorator team found something on the moon of Velos. Something deep underground." "What is it?" Rimuru asked. "A door," Helbrecht said. "A door made of black stone, with green glowing symbols. It's Necron." Rimuru put his head on the desk. Of course there are Necrons. Why wouldn't there be Necrons?" "Margos Hesh wants to open it," Helbrecht said. "Tell him if he touches it, I will eat his other arm," Rimuru said. "We don't need the T-800s waking up right now." "Too late," Helbrecht said. He sent a signal. "The door is opening." Rimuru stood up. He walked to the window. He looked at the sky. It was turning night. But the stars looked different. They were dimming. "Seal," Rimuru said, "what happens when Necrons wake up?" "Usually," Seal said, "they want their lawn back, and we are standing on their grass. The universe of Warhammer 40K is layered. You peel back the orcs, you find Tyranids. You peel back the Tyranids, you find chaos. You peel back the dirt, you find Necrons. There is no safe ground." Rimuru realized he couldn't just react anymore. He had to be proactive. He had to change the rules of the game. "Helbrecht," Rimuru said, "get the fleet ready. We aren't going to defend Velos. We are going to wake up the landlord and make a deal." "You want to negotiate with Necrons?" Helbrecht asked. "They have no souls. They have no honor." "Neither do I," Rimuru said. "I'm a slime. Maybe we have something in common." Rimuru smiled. It was a dangerous smile. The smile of a player who just decided to cheat. "Let's go say hello to the Silent King's cousins," Rimuru said. The Star of Tempest powered up its engines. The destination was Velos. The mission was diplomacy. The probability of survival was, as always, statistically insignificant. But for the Tempest Federation, that was just a Tuesday. The moon of Velos Prime was not a moon. It was a cage. For 60 million years it had orbited the planet, disguised as a desolate rock. But the signal from Magos Hesh had stripped away the camouflage. The dust fell away to reveal a surface of smooth black stone. It was blackstone, the substance that could calm the warp or sever a soul from the afterlife. As the Star of Tempest approached the lunar orbit, the crew felt the change. It was not a physical pain. It was a spiritual hollowness. The laughter in the mess hall stopped. The colors of the world seemed to fade into grey. The magicals that powered the Federation's technology began to flicker. Rimuru stood on the bridge. He felt heavy. His slime body, usually light and fluid, felt like lead. Seal reported a massive dampening field. The efficiency of his skills had dropped by 60%. The magic gear of the Tempest Templars was shutting down. The void shields were collapsing. This was the Necron Defense Network. It was the Pariah Nexus effect on a local scale. Rimuru realized that his greatest strength, his magic, had just been turned off. He looked at Helbrecht. The High Marshal was gripping the railing. He was sweating. For a man who had lived by faith, the absence of the soul's echo was terrifying. It felt like the Emperor had died. Rimuru ordered the fleet to hold a high anchor. He could not risk his ships in that field. He would go down alone, or he would have if Helbrecht had not refused to stay behind. The Marshal insisted. He said that if he was to die, he would die on his feet, not shivering in a cold ship. Rimuru agreed. They took a drop ship. They did not use magic to fly. They used chemical thrusters. They landed on the obsidian plains of the moon, near the entrance of the Great Tomb. The airlock hissed open. There was no atmosphere. Rimuru cast a simple life support barrier, but it was thin. It flickered like a dying candle. They walked onto the black glass. In front of them, a massive gate stood open. Green lightning crackled around the edges. From the darkness, they marched. The Necron warriors. They were skeletons of living metal. They carried Gauss flares that glowed with sickly green energy. They did not run. They did not shout. They marched in perfect, terrifying unison. The clicking of their metal feet on the stone was the only sound in the vacuum. Leading them was an overlord. He was 3 meters tall. His body was gold and royal blue. He wore a cloak made of tessellated light. He held a war scythe that hummed with a frequency that made Rimuru's teeth ache. This was Overlord Saramak of the Saltek dynasty. He had slept since the war in heaven. He had woken up to find vermin on his doorstep. He raised his hand. The legion stopped. He looked at Rimuru. His optic sensors flashed. He spoke. It was not sound. It was a direct transmission to their minds. He called them thieves. He called them flesh sacks. He demanded to know why they had disturbed his slumber. Rimuru stepped forward. He tried to project his usual aura of friendliness. It failed. The Blackstone absorbed his charisma. He felt small. He spoke simply. He said he was the ruler of this sector. He said he wanted peace. He said he was willing to trade. Saramak laughed. It was a metallic screech. He said the Necrons did not trade with bacteria. He said the galaxy belonged to them by right of conquest. He pointed his warsith at Velos Prime, hanging in the sky above them. He said the planet was infested. He said the Orks and the Tyranids were a stain. He announced that he had activated the World Engine Protocol. The moon was powering up. A weapon was charging. It would strip the atmosphere from Velos Prime. It would scour the life from the surface. It would kill the millions of refugees Rimuru had just saved. Rimuru felt a spark of real anger. Not the calculated anger of a leader, but the raw fury of a protector. He told Saramak that if he touched the planet, Rimuru would disassemble him bolt by bolt. Saramak accepted the challenge. He ordered his Lich Guard to attack. The battle began. It was a disaster. The Tempest Templars tried to fire their plasma bolters. The plasma dissipated in the null field. The Lich Guard moved with blinding speed. They carried hyperphase shields that cut through the Templar armor like paper. A Templar fell, his head severed. There was no blood spray in the vacuum, just a silent collapse. Helbrecht drew his sword. It was heavy without the power field. He parried a blow from a Lich Guard. The impact shattered his wrist. He did not scream. He kicked the Necron in the knee joint and stabbed it in the neck. The Necron did not die. It just looked at him and backhanded him across the plaza. Rimuru charged Saramak. He tried to use Black Lightning. It fizzled. He tried to use Gluttony. The mist was thin and weak. Saramak swung his warsith. Rimuru dodged, but the blade nicked his arm. His arm disintegrated. The Necron weapon flayed the atoms apart. Rimuru's regeneration was slow. Seal warned him. Warning. Magicule reserves critical. Physical regeneration inhibited by entropic decay. Suggest retreat. Rimuru refused. If he retreated, the planet died. He drew his katana. He infused it not with magic, but with pure spirit energy, the haki of a king. This was something the Blackstone could not fully suppress. It was willpower. He clashed with the Overlord. Sparks of gold and green flew. Rimuru was faster, but Saramak was stronger. The Overlord was made of living metal that healed instantly. Every time Rimuru cut him, the metal flowed back together. Saramak mocked him. He said Rimuru was an anomaly, a warp ghost trapped in a slime body. He said he would put Rimuru in a tesseract labyrinth and study him for eternity. He pulled out a small cube. It glowed, a dimensional trap. Rimuru felt the pull. His body began to distort. He was being sucked in. Then the inflection point arrived. It did not come from Rimuru. It came from the sky. A shadow fell over the moon. It was not a cloud. It was a bioship, a naval of the Tyranid fleet. The Tyranids on Velos Prime had sensed the awakening. The hive mind hates the Necrons. The Necrons are the anti-life. They are the only thing the Tyranids cannot eat, and because they cannot eat them, they destroy them. The hive mind had launched a desperate strike. Spores rained down on the vacuum moon. They froze instantly, but the creatures inside were adapted for the void. Genestealers and gargoyles burst from the frozen shells. They swarmed the Necron phalanxes. The Necrons turned their weapons skyward. Green beams vaporized the Tyranids, but the swarm was endless. They clogged the Gauss flayers with their bodies. They ripped at the metal joints. Saramak was distracted. He looked up at the biological filth raining on his clean tomb. He screamed in binary rage. He turned his back on Rimuru to command his troops. Seal, Rimuru thought. Now. Acknowledged, Seal said. Analyzing Blackstone frequency. Harmonizing. Rimuru didn't try to fight the null field. He synchronized with it. He vibrated his magicules to match the frequency of the Necron pylons. It hurt. It felt like burning alive. But for a second, the suppression stopped. Rimuru launched himself at Saramach. He didn't use a sword. He used Beelzebub. But he targeted the Tesseract labyrinth in the Overlord's hand. He ate the prison. He swallowed the dimensional cube. Inside his stomach, the cube expanded. It tried to trap him from the inside. But Rimuru's stomach is infinite. You cannot trap infinity in a box. The cube shattered. The energy released was massive. Rimuru channeled it. He fired a Megiddo blast, but he used the shards of the Tesseract as lenses. The beam was dimensional. It cut through Saramach's phase shift. It cut through his living metal. It sliced the Overlord in half. Saramach fell. His upper body crawled across the stone. He looked at Rimuru. His eyes flickered. He initiated his reanimation protocols. He would teleport away to be repaired. Wait, Rimuru shouted. He stomped on the Overlord's chest. He held his sword to the Necron's neck. Stop the weapon. Stop the world engine. Why? Saramach rasped. The vermin are consuming everything. Look at them. He pointed to the Tyranids. They were overwhelming the Lich Guard. If you fire the weapon, Rimuru said, you destroy the planet. But you also destroy the bait. The Tyranids are there because the biomass is there. If you kill the planet, they will come here. They will eat your tomb to find the minerals. They will bury you in flesh. Saramach calculated. His logic engine spun. The probability was high. If the biomass was removed, the hive mind would seek mineral resources. The Necrons would be overrun before they fully woke up. I can help you, Rimuru said. I can clean them up. I am better at killing bugs than you are. Saramach looked at the blue creature. He saw the logic. Use the anomaly to destroy the infestation. It was efficient. Truce, Saramach said. Temporary, until the biomass is purged. Deal, Rimuru said. Saramach sent a signal. The world engine powered down. The green glow on the moon faded. The null field reduced in intensity. It didn't vanish, but it became bearable. Rimuru felt his strength return. He turned to the Tyranids. Now he had to fulfill his end of the bargain. He had to kill the Void Swarm. Helbrecht, Rimuru shouted. Get the Templars back to the ship. I'm going to do some cleaning. Helbrecht nodded. He gathered the survivors. They retreated to the dropship. Rimuru flew up. He was back in his element. He was angry. The Necrons had hurt him. The Tyranids had interrupted him. He decided to show them both why he was the Demon Lord. He activated the Uriel, the Lord of Vows. He used absolute severance. He created a barrier around the moon, a spatial lock. Nothing could get in. The Tyranid bioships crashed into the invisible wall and shattered. Then Rimuru turned to the surface. Thousands of Tyranids were crawling on the black glass. Rimuru descended. He transformed. He became the slime, but he grew. He expanded. He covered the plaza. He flowed like a blue tsunami. He engulfed the Tyranids. He dissolved them. He ate their genetic code. He ate their biomass. The Necrons watched. They stood in their ranks, silent statues. They watched the biological slime consume the biological horror. It was a scene of utter revulsion for them, but it was effective. In an hour, the moon was clean. Rimuru reformed. He stood before Saramach. He spat out a piece of Tyranid carapace. Done, Rimuru said. Saramach stood up. His body had repaired itself. "You are efficient for a warp ghost. Now about the planet," Rimuru said. "Velos Prime stays under my protection. You stay on the moon. We share the system." "The Silent King will not accept this," Saramak said. "But I am awake early. My forces are not at full strength. I will accept your terms. For one solar cycle. 1 year. 1 year is all I need," Rimuru said. They did not shake hands. Necrons do not touch flesh. Saramak simply turned and walked back into the dark gate. The green lightning faded. The door closed. The moon was silent again. Rimuru collapsed. He fell to his knees. He was exhausted. Fighting the null field had drained his soul reserves. Helbrecht ran to him. He helped him up. "We did it," Helbrecht said. "We stopped the world engine." "We bought time," Rimuru whispered. "Just time." They returned to the ship. The fleet pulled back to Griffin the Four. The crisis at Velos was contained. The Orks were quarantined. The Tyranids were dead. The Necrons were sleeping. But the cost was high. The Federation now had a ticking clock. 1 year. In 1 year, the Necrons would wake up fully, and they would bring their god-killing weapons. Rimuru sat in his quarters. He looked at the data Seal had stolen from the Necron network during the fight. It was a map of the galaxy, but it showed something Rimuru hadn't seen before. It showed the Great Rift expanding, but it also showed something else. A signal coming from Terra, from the Golden Throne. The Emperor was watching. The Necron data revealed that the Emperor's psychic light was focusing on the Griffon sector. The Astronomicon was brighter there. It was as if the Emperor was pointing a spotlight at Rimuru. "Why?" Rimuru asked. "Hypothesis," Seal said. "The Emperor perceives you as a system update. He is trying to integrate you into his plan." "I don't have a plan," Rimuru said. "I just want to build a town." "That is the plan," Seal said. "A town that survives." The Tempest Federation was no longer just a rebel faction. It was a buffer state. It stood between the Tyranids, the Orks, and the Necrons. Rimuru had become the cork in the bottle. If he failed, the eastern fringe would collapse. And deep in the forge of Griffin IV, Magos Hesh was working on something new. He had analyzed the blackstone shards Rimuru had coughed up. He was building a pylon that didn't suppress magic, but amplified it. He was building a Tempest amplifier. It was heresy. It was genius. It was the only way they would survive the next year. Rimuru went to sleep. He dreamed of his old world. He dreamed of Tempest. He missed Veldora. He wondered if Veldora could eat a Catan. He chuckled in his sleep. That would be a fight worth seeing. The galaxy turned. The war machines ground on. And in the dark, the Necron Silent King shifted his course. He had sensed the anomaly. He was coming to see the slime. The 6 months following the Treaty of Velos were the most dangerous kind of time in the 41st millennium. They were peaceful. In a galaxy fueled by war, peace is a vacuum. It pulls things in. The Tempest Federation grew fat. The harvest on Griffin IV was the largest in recorded history. The factories produced millions of tons of consumer goods. To the average citizen, it was a golden age. To Rimuru Tempest, it was boring. He sat in his office, spinning a pen. He had signed every trade agreement. He had inspected every wall. He needed a project. He looked at General Hesh. The Fabricator General had replaced his lower body with a hover platform made of living metal. He looked less like a priest and more like a silver statue. Rimuru asked about the Blackstone project. Hesh's optical sensors brightened. He said the device was ready. He called it the Resonant Soul Amplifier. It was a massive tower built in the center of the capital. It used the black stone shards from the Necron moon to invert the null field effect. Instead of dampening souls, it amplified intention. Rimuru had a small idea, a very small idea. He missed the festivals of his old world. He wanted to throw a party. He wanted to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Federation. But he didn't just want to invite his own citizens. He wanted to invite the neighbors. He wanted to show the Imperium that he wasn't a monster. He told Hesh to use the amplifier to broadcast an invitation, not a vox signal, a psychic signal, a message of safe harbor. He thought it would be a nice gesture, a way to say, "We are open for business." Seal calculated the risk. She warned that the Imperium's psychic sensitivity was low, but their paranoia was high. She suggested a localized broadcast. Rimuru disagreed. He said they needed to be loud to be heard over the screaming of the galaxy. He authorized a segmentum-wide pulse. He pressed the button. It was a red button on Hesh's console. It was a small choice, just a button press, just a party invitation. The amplifier hummed. The Blackstone Tower glowed blue. A wave of energy shot up into the atmosphere. It hit the psychic barrier of the Great Rift and bounced. It spread across the segmentum tempestus. It washed over 1,000 worlds. It did not carry words. It carried a feeling. It carried the feeling of a full stomach. It carried the feeling of a warm bed. It carried the feeling of a father telling you that everything is going to be okay. On the shrine world of Sanctus Lys, 10 light years away, Cardinal Darto was preaching a sermon about the necessity of pain. He was telling a crowd of 1 million starving pilgrims that their hunger was a gift to the Emperor. Then the wave hit him. He stopped speaking. He felt the warmth. He felt the blue light. He dropped his staff. He looked at the sky. He saw a vision of a city where the water was clean and the bread was free. He wept. He fell to his knees. He declared to the crowd that the Emperor had sent a sign. He said a new saint had risen in the east, the Saint of Blue. The reaction was instant and terrifying. The crusade of bread began. It was not a military crusade. It was a migration. Millions of citizens on Sanctus Lys stormed the spaceports. They did not have weapons. They had hunger. They overwhelmed the Arbites. They stole grain haulers. They stole mining ships. They stole pleasure yachts. They launched a ragtag fleet of 10,000 ships. They set course for Griffin Sar 4. They were not invading. They were coming for dinner. This phenomenon repeated across a dozen systems. Astropaths on hive worlds screamed that the darkness was lifting. Psychers, who usually heard the scratching of demons, suddenly heard a calming melody. The Pax Rimuru began to spread like a virus. The work quotas on Imperial worlds dropped. Why work yourself to death for a corpse on a throne when the Blue Saint is offering a vacation? Unholy terror, the High Lord screamed. The Master of the Administratum looked at the production graphs. They were flatlining in the Tempestus sector. The Fabricator General of Mars looked at the Tech Heresy reports. They were spiking. The Ecclesiarch saw his flock leaving. They met in the Senatorum Imperialis. They did not invite Robuti, Gilliman. The Primarch was busy with the Indomitus Crusade on the other side of the rift. They acted alone. They declared Rimuru Tempest a mimetic hazard. They declared the Federation a moral threat extremis. They did not send the Imperial Guard. The Guard might defect. They did not send the Standard Marines. The Marines might respect the martial prowess of the Federation. They sent the Executioners. They sent the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs chapter is the personal weapon of the High Lords. They are brutal. They are paranoid. They specialize in killing other Space Marines and crushing rebellions. Their chapter master, Asterion Moloch, is a monster in bronze armor. He wields the black spear. He does not care about morality. He cares about orders. His order was simple. Sanctify the sector. In High Gothic, sanctify means kill everyone until the silence returns. The Minotaur's fleet arrived at the edge of the Griffon system 2 weeks after the signal. They did not come alone. They brought the Order of the Bloody Rose from the Adepta Sororitas. The sisters were whipped into a frenzy by the ecclesiarchy. They believed Rimuru was a false idol mocking the emperor. They wanted to burn the witch. Rimuru stood on the balcony of his palace. He looked at the sky. It was filled with ships, but they were not enemy ships yet. They were the pilgrims. The crusade of bread had arrived. Thousands of rusted, leaking vessels orbited Griffon's Beswai. Before, the Vox channels were filled with prayers. They were asking for the Blue Saint to feed them. Rimuru was overwhelmed. He had invited neighbors. He got a refugee crisis, but he couldn't turn them away. That went against his policy. He ordered the Tempest Templars to organize relief efforts. He ordered the spaceports to open. He ordered the replicators to make millions of loaves of bread. Seal, Rimuru said. Is this bad? Answer, Seal replied. Logistical strain is acceptable. Political strain is catastrophic. By accepting these refugees, you are stealing the Emperor's subjects. This is an act of war. I just wanted to have a festival, Rimuru groaned. Then the Minotaurs arrived. They exited the warp right in the middle of the pilgrim fleet. They did not hail the refugees. They opened fire. The Minotaur battle barges unleashed a broadside of macro cannon shells. The pilgrim ships were not warships. They had no shields. They evaporated. Tens of thousands of civilians died in seconds. The debris field turned into a slaughterhouse. Rimuru watched the explosions from the surface. He felt the souls crying out. He felt the same rage he felt at Ethelgard. But this was worse. These were his guests. Helbrecht burst into the room. He was fully armored. My lord, the Minotaurs. They are butchering them. I see them, Rimuru said. His voice was cold. Kotias is on the line, Helbrecht said. He says if we fire back, the ceasefire is void. He says these are Imperial citizens and it is an internal Imperial matter. We have no jurisdiction. Rimuru took the Voxcaster. Kotias, are you watching this? I am, the Inquisitor's voice came through. It is regrettable, but it is the law. They are heretics who abandon their stations. The High Lords have passed judgment. They are hungry people, Rimuru said, and they are in my house. If you engage the Minotaurs, Kotias warned, you declare war on the High Lords of Terror. There is no going back. The Grey Knights will return. The Custodes might come. You will be the enemy of mankind. Rimuru looked at the burning ships. He saw a transport full of children explode. Seal, Rimuru said. Draft a new treaty. What are the terms? Kill asked. The terms are, if you touch my guests, I will break your legs. Rimuru hung up. He looked at Helbrecht. Deploy the fleet, all of it. And Helbrecht, yes, Lord. Bring me the head of Asterion Moloch. The Battle of the Bread began. The Federation fleet, led by the Star of Tempest, charged the Minotaurs. It was a clash of philosophies. The Minotaurs fought with brutal, overwhelming firepower. They used phosphex weapons that burned in the void. They didn't care about collateral damage. The Federation fleet fought with precision. They used gravity magic to shield the pilgrim ships. They used teleportation to board the enemy vessels. Helbrecht led the boarding party on the Minotaur flagship, the Daedalus Crater. He smashed through the airlock. He was followed by his sword brethren and Ranga. They met the Minotaurs in the corridors. It was Astartes against Astartes, bronze against silver. The Minotaurs were strong. They were gene-bulked monsters. But the Tempest Templars were faster. They had the thought acceleration blessing from Rimuru. They saw the bolter shells in slow motion. They dodged. They struck. Helbrecht carved a path to the bridge. Asterion Moloch waited for him. The chapter master sat on his command throne like a statue of war. He stood up. He was a head taller than Helbrecht. He held the black spear, a weapon of unknown origin that dripped with entropy. "Traitor," Moloch rumbled. His voice sounded like a landslide. "You sully the blood of dawn." "I serve the living," Helbrecht retorted. "You serve the dead." They clashed. The black spear met the sword of the High Marshals. The impact blew out the bridge windows. They fought in the vacuum. Moloch was a tank. He absorbed Helbrecht's blows and countered with crushing force. He stabbed Helbrecht in the shoulder. The spear sizzled, eating the armor. Helbrecht grunted. He didn't retreat. He grabbed the spear shaft. "Ranga, now!" Ranga emerged from Helbrecht's shadow. The wolf was now the size of a tank. He bit Moloch's arm. Moloch punched the wolf, but Ranga held on. Helbrecht used the opening. He channeled his haki. He didn't cut Moloch. He punched him. A punch enhanced by Rimuru's magic. It cracked Moloch's breastplate. Moloch stumbled. Helbrecht kicked him into the tactical display. "Get off my ship," Moloch roared. He teleported away. The Minotaurs did not fight to the death if the math was bad. They retreated. The Daedalus Crater turned and fled. The Minotaur fleet broke formation. They had underestimated the Federation. On the surface, the Sisters of Battle had landed. They were burning the refugee camps. Canoness Viridian led them. She wielded a flamer fueled by holy oil. She screamed that the bread was tainted. She burned the food supplies. Rimuru landed in front of her. He didn't wear armor. He wore his black coat. The sisters turned their flamers on him. The fire washed over him. It did nothing. Rimuru walked through the flames. He looked sad. "Why?" Rimuru asked. "Why do you hate food?" "It is the fruit of the Xenos," Viridian screamed. "It corrupts the soul." "It fills the stomach," Rimuru said. "And the soul lives in the body." He raised his hand. Water prison. Bubbles of water formed around the sisters. They were trapped. The fire went out. They floated, unable to move. Rimuru didn't kill them. He put them in time out. "Cool off," Rimuru said. The battle was won, but the line was crossed. Kotea sent a final message. "You have attacked the High Lord's fleet. The ceasefire is over. Prepare for judgment." Rimuru didn't care. He looked at the survivors. He looked at the pilgrims landing their broken ships. They cheered him. They called him the God of Blue. Rimuru felt a headache coming on. He didn't want to be a god. He just wanted to be a mayor. But the amplifier had done more than attract the Imperium. The psychic noise had echoed in the warp. It had reached the Garden of Nurgle. The Chaos God of Despair was not happy. Shion had cleaned his station. Rimuru had cured his plagues. And now, this blue saint was spreading hope. Nurgle hates hope. Hope is the opposite of acceptance. Nurgle wants you to accept the rot. Rimuru makes you want to wash it off. Nurgle called his favorite son, the Primarch of the Death Guard, the Pale King, Mortarion. Mortarion was brooding on his plague planet. He felt the disturbance. He felt the amplifier. It felt like a cure. It disgusted him. He stood up. His moth wings shook the toxic air. He grabbed his scythe. Silence. He gathered his fleet. This was not a raid. This was a personal vendetta. He would go to Griffin the Sam. For he would destroy the amplifier, and he would turn the blue slime into a puddle of goo. Back on Griffin the Four, the celebration began. It was a victory party. The pilgrims shared their stories. The Tempest Templars drank with the refugees. It was a moment of light. But in the laboratory, Magos Hesht noticed something. The amplifier was acting strange. It was vibrating. It was picking up a signal, not an outgoing signal, an incoming one. Analysis, Ciel said to Rimuru. Hyperspatial breach detected. It is not the Imperium. It is not the Orcs. Who is it? Rimuru asked. It is the warp, Ciel said. A massive intrusion. Coordinates, directly above the capital. The sky over Griffin 4 tore open. It didn't turn green or purple. It turned the color of a bruise. Clouds of flies filled the atmosphere. They blocked the sun. A rain of slime began to fall. It smelled of sulfur and death. From the clouds, the Terminus S descended, the flagship of the Death Guard. It was a fortress of rust. It dwarfed the Federation ships. Rimuru flew up to meet it. He hovered in the rain. He felt the presence. It was ancient. It was bitter. A figure descended from the ship. He didn't use a drop pod. He flew on ragged wings. He was a giant. He wore armor that looked like it had been rotting for 10,000 years. He held a scythe that dripped with the death of worlds. He wore a rebreather mask that hissed with every breath. Mortarion, the Daemon Primarch. He stopped in the air, 100 meters from Rimuru. He looked at the small slime. So, Mortarion rasped. His voice sounded like dirt sliding on a coffin lid. You are the one who denies the grandfather. I'm Rimuru, the slime said. And you're violating the noise ordinance. Mortarion did not laugh. I am the inevitable. I am the end of all hope. Your little light offends me. He raised his hand. He didn't cast a spell. He released a plague wind. It was a conceptual attack. It was the concept of entropy. It washed over the city. The flowers in the garden died instantly. The iron of the buildings rusted. The shields of the Tempest Templars flickered and failed. The pilgrims on the ground began to cough. Ciel, Rimuru shouted. Defense. Negative, Ciel said. Barrier penetration confirmed. This is a Primarch-level threat. He is attacking the laws of physics directly. Rimuru flared his aura. He pushed back against the entropy. His gold light fought the green fog. It was a clash of wills. You think you can stop the rot? Mortarion asked. Everything rots, even stars, even gods, even you. Not today, Rimuru said. He drew his katana. He charged. The duel began. It was not a fight of swords. It was the fight of realities. Mortarion swung silence. The scythe cut the air, leaving a trail of void. Rimuru blocked. His sword held. But the shockwave leveled a city block. Below, the Death Guard landed. This was not a small raiding party. This was the Legion. Thousands of plague marines, poxwalkers, plague burst crawlers. They marched into the city. The Tempest Templars met them. It was a nightmare. The Federation's technology, usually their edge, was failing. The slime lubricants dried up. The adamantium rusted. The Death Guard's aura of despair was stronger than the Amplifier's aura of hope. Helbrecht fought back-to-back with Xion. Shan's cooking magic was the only thing that slowed the Marines down. She turned their armor into cake. Helbrecht smashed the cake armor, but there were too many of them. Rimuru realized he was losing. Mortarion was too strong. He was a being of infinite stamina. He didn't get tired. He just kept coming. You are weak, Mortarion whispered. He grabbed Rimuru by the throat. You care too much. You bleed for these cattle. That is why you will die. He threw Rimuru into the amplifier tower. The black stone cracked. The blue light flickered. Rimuru lay in the rubble. He was hurt. His regeneration was slow. The plague was inhibiting his cells. He looked at the city. It was burning. The pilgrims he had tried to save were dying. Ciel, Rimuru thought. I messed up. I invited them to their death. Correction, Shill said. You invited them to a choice. And now, you must make a choice. What choice? To win this battle, Keel said. You must use the energy of the amplifier. But if you use it as a weapon, you destroy the device. You destroy the beacon of hope. If I don't use it, Rimuru said, there is no one left to hope. Rimuru stood up. He wiped the blood from his mouth. He looked at Mortarion. You're right, Rimuru said. I care too much, and that makes me angry. Rimuru flew to the top of the broken tower. He placed his hand on the black stone core. Listen to me, Mortarion, Rimuru shouted. You say everything rots. I say everything evolves. He didn't drain the amplifier. He inverted it again. He fed his own essence, his food chain skill, into the tower. He turned the tower into a massive stomach. Gluttony, world devourer mode. The tower turned black. It began to suck in the air. It sucked in the plague fog. It sucked in the flies. It sucked in the despair. Mortarion stopped. He felt his power draining. The atmosphere of the planet was being scrubbed. What are you doing? Mortarion hissed. I'm taking out the trash, Rimuru said. But the strain was too much. Rimuru's body began to crack. He was processing too much corruption. He was turning black. Warning, Seal said. Corruption levels at 90%. Soul collapse imminent. Rimuru ignored the warning. He had to finish this. He poured all the poison into himself. Then, a miracle happened. It wasn't a magic spell. It wasn't a tactical maneuver. The pilgrims, the millions of refugees hiding in the bunkers, they saw the blue light fighting the green darkness. They saw their saint dying to save them. They began to pray. They didn't pray to the emperor on the throne. They prayed to the slime on the tower. Rimuru, Rimuru, Rimuru. The psychic energy of millions of souls hit the amplifier. It mixed with Rimuru's magic. It created a feedback loop. The faith attribute. Rimuru glowed. The black corruption shattered. He turned brilliant white. He evolved, not a biological evolution, a conceptual evolution. Notice, Seal announced. Individual Rimuru Tempest has acquired the attribute Living Saint. Imperial designation confirmed. Rimuru opened his eyes. They were white fire. He pointed at Mortarion. Go home, Rimuru said. He released a pulse of holy energy. It was Megiddo, but made of pure faith. The beam hit Mortarion. The Primarch screamed. For the first time in 10,000 years he felt pain. The rot on his armor burned away. He looked at his hand. The flesh was pink, healthy. It terrified him. No, Mortarion roared. I will not be clean. He retreated. He couldn't fight this. This was the anathema's light, but wielded by a Xenos. It was an abomination he couldn't counter. The Terminus Est fired its retro thrusters. The Death Guard fled. They ran from the light. Rimuru collapsed on the tower. The light faded. He was back to blue, but he was different. He felt heavier. He felt the weight of millions of prayers. The battle was over. The city was saved. But the galaxy had changed. In the warp, the Emperor opened his eyes. He smiled, a real smile. He had found his proxy. But on the vengeful spirit, Abaddon the Despoiler watched the scrying pool. He saw Mortarion flee. He saw the white light. The false Emperor has a new son, Abaddon growled. We must kill it before it grows. Rimuru sat up. Helbrecht was there. The Marshal knelt. My lord, Helbrecht said, you are shining. I'm tired, Helbrecht, Rimuru said. I'm so tired. Rest, Helbrecht said. The pilgrims are safe. The Minotaurs are gone. The Death Guard is gone. But they'll be back, Rimuru whispered. Yes, Helbrecht said. And we will be ready. This ended with a small choice, a party invitation, leading to the creation of a new deity in the 41st millennium. Rimuru was no longer just a political leader. He was a religious icon. He had unintentionally started a new religion, and that made him the most dangerous thing in the universe. The stage was set for the final confrontation. The galaxy would not tolerate a new god. The convergence was coming, and everyone was invited. The light of the Griffin's star failed on the third day of the month of silence. It was not a natural phenomenon. A cage had been built around the star, a Dyson sphere of shimmering, living green energy. The temperature on Griffin 4 dropped 20 degrees in an hour. The crops in the new agricultural zones froze. The pilgrims, still celebrating their survival from the death guard, looked up and saw the end of the world. It was not the chaotic rot of Nurgle. It was the cold, perfect order of the Necrons. The Zarekhan dynasty had arrived, and they had brought the Song of Oblivion. This was not a fleet. It was a migration of gods. The flagship of the Silent King was the size of a continent. It did not orbit the planet. It dominated it. The gravity tides caused by its arrival shifted the tectonic plates of Griffin 4. Massive earthquakes swallowed the industrial districts. The Tempest Federation, which had fought off Orks, Crusade fleets, and Daemon Primarchs, found itself paralyzed. The pariah nexus, generated by the Silent King's throne, was absolute. It did not just dampen magic, it deleted the concept of hope. The pilgrims who had generated the white light fell into comas. Their souls were smothered by the weight of 60 million years of apathy. Rimuru Tempest sat on his throne in the capital. He could not move. The connection to his people was severed. The food chain skill was blocked. He felt isolated. For the first time since coming to this universe, he felt truly small. Seal was working at 1,000,000% capacity, burning Rimuru's soul reserves just to keep his consciousness intact. She reported that the enemy was Zarek, the last of the Silent Kings, the being who had killed the Old Ones, the being who had shattered the Catan. He was not a foe that could be defeated by a sword or a spell. He was a force of entropy. High Marshal Helbrecht crawled into the throne room. His armor was locked up. His cybernetics were dead. He dragged himself by his organic arm. He looked at Rimuru. His eyes were bleeding. The pressure was crushing his brain. He gasped that the fleet was dead in the water. The Star of Tempest was drifting. The automated defenses were offline. They were defenseless. Rimuru forced his hand to move. He tapped the armrest of his throne. He poured his own life force into the local reality. He pushed back the null field just enough to create a bubble around the room. Helbrecht gasped, sucking in air as if he had been drowning. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It was not a projection of light. It was a projection of absence. A figure sat on a floating throne. It was tall, skeletal, and regal. It wore the skin of a god as a cloak. 2 other Necrons stood beside it, the Triarchs, speaking with one voice. But the central figure, Zarek, looked directly at Rimuru. He did not speak. The universe spoke for him. A transmission overrode every frequency in the sector. It was a demand for submission. It stated that the anomaly known as Rimuru Tempest had disrupted the galactic equation. The rapid expansion of the Federation, the awakening of the Dragon Void, Veldora's energy signature, and the creation of a new saint had drawn the attention of the hive mind. Zarek declared that to save the galaxy from the tyrannies, he had to sterilize the bait. Rimuru was the bait. Rimuru understood. The Silent King wasn't here to conquer. He was here to euthanize a sick animal before the infection spread. But Rimuru had an ace card, or rather, a joker. He knew something Zarek didn't. Seal had analyzed the Tyranid movement patterns during the Velos campaign. The Tyranids weren't just coming for Rimuru. They were coming for the Necrons too. The abundance of blackstone in the Sarkhan fleet was a mineral resource the hive mind craved to create anti-warp biomorphs. Seal, Rimuru whispered. Open a channel. Full broadcast. Warning, Seal replied. Energy costs will reduce lifespan by 500 years. Do it, Rimuru said. The channel opened. Rimuru projected his voice to the massive ship above. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't ask for a duel. He asked a simple question. How is your soul doing, Zarek? The hologram flickered. The Silent King moved his head slightly. It was a microscopic movement, but for a being of absolute stillness, it was a shout of surprise. Rimuru continued. He said he knew the Necrons had lost their souls to the Catan. He knew they felt nothing but cold logic and regret. He said that he, Rimuru, was made of souls. He was a vessel of spiritual energy. If Zarek killed him, that energy would disperse into the warp, feeding chaos. But if they talked, Rimuru might be able to offer a trade. The transmission cut. The pressure increased. Zarek was considering the insult. But then, the second catastrophe struck. The augurs of the Song of Oblivion screamed. Real space tore open at the edge of the system. But it wasn't one tear. It was thousands. The Hive Fleet Leviathan had arrived. And it wasn't just a splinter fleet. It was the main tendril. Billions of bioships. They blotted out the stars that the Necrons hadn't already caged. The Tyranids did not care about the pariah nexus. Their shadow in the warp was a counter-frequency. The two anti-psychic fields clashed. The result was a headache that crippled every living being in the system. The Tyranids threw themselves at the Necron fleet. Bioplasma hit living metal. The Necrons returned fire with WAAAGHs that stripped the atoms from the bioships. It was a war of annihilation. The sky over Griffin 4 turned into a fireworks display of green and purple. Rimuru felt the null field waver. The Necrons were distracted. This was his chance. Helbrecht, Rimuru said, standing up. Get the Templars. We are going to the big ship. To fight, Helbrecht asked. To negotiate, Rimuru said. Aggressively. Rimuru teleported. He didn't aim for the bridge. He aimed for the hull of the Song of Oblivion. He landed on the surface of the massive vessel. It was like standing on a metallic planet. He was immediately surrounded by Lich Guard. They raised their shields. Rimuru raised his hands. He held a jar of honey. It was Tempest honey, processed from the magical flowers of his garden. It was pure, concentrated spiritual energy. I have a gift, Rimuru shouted. The Lich Guard hesitated. Logic dictated they kill him. But the king's command override came through. Bring him. Rimuru was escorted into the throne room of the Silent King. The room was the size of a city. The walls were lined with the trapped shards of Satan, star gods screaming in silent agony. Zarek sat on his dais. He looked down at the slime. He looked at the jar of honey. The Triarch spoke. They asked if this was a joke. Rimuru threw the jar. It shattered at the king's feet. The golden liquid spilled. The aroma filled the vacuum. It wasn't air. It was spiritual pressure. Zarek felt it. For the first time in 60 million years, his sensors registered a sensation that wasn't data. It was warmth, a phantom sensation of a soul he no longer had. It was fleeting, but it was real. Rimuru explained. His unique skill, food chain, allowed him to process and refine souls. He didn't eat them to destroy them. He stored them. He could create a synthetic soul substitute. It wouldn't give them their bodies back, but it could give them back the ability to feel satisfaction, to feel art, to feel the victory. I can give you back your taste, Rimuru said, but only if you help me kill the bugs. The Silent King remained silent. He looked at the spill. He looked at the tactical map showing his fleet being consumed by the Tyranids. The Leviathan was adapting. They were growing carapace that reflected Gauss beams. They were evolving. If the Necrons fought alone, they would win, but at a cost of thousands of ships, and they would gain nothing. If they allied with the slime, they would win faster, and they would gain a taste of what they had lost. Zarek stood up. He raised his scepter. He pointed it at the tactical map. He nodded. The alliance was formed. It was the most unholy union in the history of the galaxy. The Necrons and the Federation. Rimuru teleported back to his ship. He contacted his fleet. The dampening field was lifted. The engines roared to life. "All units," Rimuru commanded. "Follow the Necrons. Don't shoot the green skeletons. Shoot the purple bugs." The battle that followed was legendary. The Song of Oblivion fired its main weapon. A beam of antimatter that erased a line of Tyranid Hive ships. Through the gap, the Federation fleet charged. The Tempest Templars rode on the hulls of Necron Doom scythes. Shion stood on the prow of her frigate, launching energy slashes that combined with Necron Tesla arcs. On the ground, the Tyranids had made planetfall. They were overrunning the capital. The General Hesh was fighting a Carnifex with his mechanical claws. He was losing. His logic core was calculating his death. Then, a monolith teleported in front of him. The massive Necron pyramid opened its eternity gate. Necron warriors marched out. They formed a phalanx around the Mechanicus priest. They fired their flayers. The Carnifex disintegrated. Hesh looked at the Necron overlord leading them. It was Saramak from Velos. "You are inefficient," Saramak broadcasted to Hesh. "You are Xenos filth," Hesh replied. "Affirmative," Saramak said. "Targeting Tyranids." They fought back to back, machine cultist and ancient machine. They held the line. High above, Rimuru flew to the heart of the Hive fleet. He sensed the Norn Queen, the brain of the invasion. She was hidden inside a moon-sized bioship. She was protected by a psychic shield that could crush a Titan. Rimuru didn't care. He had Ciel, and he had a new trick. He activated his Living Saint attribute. He turned white. He became a beacon of pure faith. But he mixed it with the Necron's Blackstone frequency he had analyzed. He created a holy null field. It was a paradox, a field that amplified faith but cancelled psychic commands. He dived into the bioship. The Tyranid guards tried to stop him. He flew through them. He melted them with his aura. He reached the chamber of the Norn Queen. She was a massive pulsating sack of organs hanging from the ceiling. She screamed a psychic death blast at him. The blast hit Rimuru's field and shattered. "Checkmate," Rimuru said. He didn't eat her. He touched her. He used Shaper skill. He forced a mutation. He introduced a logical error into her genetic code. A command that said, "Self-cannibalism is efficient." The Norn Queen froze. The logic took hold. The hive mind is driven by efficiency. If eating itself is efficient, it must do it. The bioship began to digest its own walls. The Norn Queen began to eat her own tentacles. The signal spread to the fleet. The Tyranids stopped attacking the planet. They turned on each other. The larger ships ate the smaller ships. The swarm consumed itself in a frenzy of madness. Rimuru flew out of the dying beast. He watched the implosion. It was gross. It was beautiful. The Silent King watched from his throne. He saw the logic virus spread. He saw the slime defeat a hive fleet not with firepower, but with a biological paradox. He realized that this creature was dangerous, more dangerous than the Satan, because the slime understood the fundamental rule of the universe. Change is inevitable. The Necrons fought change. Rimuru weaponized it. The Tyranid fleet was reduced to a drifting cloud of biomass. The threat was ended. The Necron fleet powered down its weapons. The Federation fleet formed a defensive ring around Griffin 4. The silence returned, but it was a different silence. It was the silence of respect. Rimuru teleported to the surface of the moon of Griffin 4. Sarek was waiting for him. The Silent King stood alone on the grey dust. Rimuru landed. He transformed into his human form. He straightened his coat. "You kept your word," Rimuru said. Sarek nodded. The Triarchs were not there. He spoke directly. His voice was a vibration in the ground. "You possess the anomaly," Sarek said. "The synthesis of soul and data. It is intriguing." "I'm just a slime," Rimuru said. "You are a variable," Sarek said. "I will not destroy you today. You are a useful buffer against the Great Devourer, and against the warp." "And the deal?" Rimuru asked. "The taste?" Sarek extended his hand. It was a gesture he had not made in eons. Rimuru produced a small crystal. It contained the synthesized experience of victory, a memory of joy. He placed it in Sarek's hand. The metal fingers closed around it. The Silent King shuddered. A green light pulsed in his eyes. For a second, he remembered what it was like to win and feel happy about it, rather than just satisfied with the data. "Adequate," Sarek said. "We will maintain the Velos protocol. You keep your sector. We keep the void beyond. But do not cross the line, and do not let the warp fester." "I promise," Rimuru said. Sarek turned. He dissolved into green atoms and vanished. The song of oblivion turned slowly. It accelerated without inertia. It vanished into the dark. The Necrons were gone, but they were watching. Rimuru sat down on the moon dust. He took a deep breath. He didn't need to breathe, but it felt good. "Seal," Rimuru said. "We survived." "Correction," Shul said. "We triumphed. Strategic analysis. The Tempest Federation is now recognized as a Tier 1 galactic power. We have non-aggression pacts with the Necrons and the Tau. We have a ceasefire with the Inquisition. We have destroyed a Hive fleet. And we have a lot of cleaning up to do," Rimuru said. He looked down at Griffin the 4. The Dyson sphere was gone. The sun was shining again. The damage was severe, but the people were alive. The factories were already restarting. He saw the small lights of repair crews moving in the cities. He returned to the palace. Helbrecht was waiting. Shion was waiting. Hesh was waiting. They looked at him. They didn't cheer. They just looked at him with absolute loyalty. He was their king, their saint, their monster. "What now, Lord?" Helbrecht asked. Rimuru walked to the map of the galaxy. It was red with war, but there was a small patch of blue in the east, a patch that was growing. "Now," Rimuru said, "we open the schools, we fix the roads, and maybe, just maybe, we figure out how to wake up that guy on the golden throne. I think he and I need to have a long talk." The room went silent. To wake the Emperor was the ultimate goal of the Imperium, but also its greatest fear. If the Emperor woke up, the Imperium would burn. But Rimuru didn't fear the fire. He was the fire. "But first," Rimuru smiled, "I'm hungry. Shion, did you make dinner?" Shion beamed. "Yes, I made a Tyranid stew." Rimuru's smile froze. Helbrecht took a step back. Hesh's logic core signaled an error. "Actually," Rimuru said, "let's order pizza. I think I can make pizza." The laughter that filled the room was the true victory. In a galaxy of only war, the ability to laugh was the strongest weapon of all. The Rimuru heresy was over. The Rimuru era had begun. The chronicle ends here. The records of the Administratum list the Griffin sector as perdita, lost, but to the people who live there, it is not lost. It is found. They live in the eye of the storm, protected by a god who likes honey and hates sadness. And as the 42nd millennium dawns, the blue flag of the Tempest Federation flies high, a challenge to the darkness, a promise that even in the grim dark future, there is still time for a happy ending. Archival record, the Indomitus era, Year 12. Location, Macraga, Fortress of Hera. Subject, the Eastern Fringe, Anomaly. Robot, Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and Lord Commander of the Imperium. Sat alone in his scriptorium. The room was filled with data slates, scrolls, and holographic projections. The galaxy was burning. The Great Rift had torn the domain of his father in half. The Pariah Nexus was silencing souls in the Nephilim sector. The Tyranids were consuming the galactic west, but Guilliman's eyes were fixed on the east, on the Griffin sector. The tactical map showed a sphere of influence that was not colored imperial gold, nor chaos red, nor Xenos green. It was colored blue. He picked up the report titled The Velos Protocol. It was written by Inquisitor Coteas. It detailed the unthinkable, an alliance between a Xenos entity, the Necron Silent King, and a renegade faction of humanity. It detailed the destruction of a hive fleet without the loss of a single planet. It detailed a world where the production quotas were met not by slave labor, but by automated golems and well-fed citizens. Guilliman read the statistics again. Infant mortality in the Tempest Federation was 0. Starvation was 0. Heresy, defined as worship of the dark gods, was 0. It was the dream the Emperor had strove for during the Great Crusade. It was the dream that had been reduced to ash and dogma, and it had been achieved by a slime. Guilliman felt a bitterness in his chest. It was not jealousy. It was shame. As Xenos had succeeded where his brothers had failed. He looked at the picked capture of Rimuru Tempest, the small, unassuming figure standing amidst the wreckage of a Norn queen. Guilliman saw the golden eyes. He did not see a monster. He saw a peer. He realized that this entity was not a conqueror in the traditional sense. It was a builder, and the Imperium, in its decaying state, had forgotten how to build. It only knew how to maintain the ruins. The Lord Commander made a decision. He placed the report in a stasis casket. He marked it with his personal seal. Omega Vermilion, do not engage. He would not send a crusade to destroy the Federation. He could not afford to. He needed the buffer. If Rimuru Tempest wanted to hold the Eastern Gate against the darkness, Guilliman would let him. He would let the slime build his utopia, because Guilliman knew the truth of this universe. Utopias are fragile. The galaxy hates order. Eventually, the Federation would be tested by something it could not eat and could not befriend. Across the stars on the craft world Ulthwe, Eldred Ulthran looked into the infinity circuit. The strands of fate had tangled. The thread of the Inari, the thread of the Primarchs, the thread of the dark gods. They were all vibrating with a new resonance. A rogue note had entered the symphony. The Farseer saw a vision of a golden throne that was not decaying, but blooming. He saw the corpse of the Emperor opening its eyes, fueled not by the sacrifice of psychers, but by a blue vitality. Eldred smiled a sad, ancient smile. The Monkey had found a new way to cheat extinction. In the deepest shadows of the Federation, the cults were already forming. They were not sanctioned by Rimuru. He hated them, but he could not stop them. Soldiers engraved slime crests on their bolters. Mothers sang lullabies about the Lord of Honey. The Tempest faith was spreading through the trade lanes, carried by free traders and rogue traders. It whispered that there was a place where the grim darkness was kept at bay by a barrier of kindness. It was a dangerous hope. It made people look away from terror. It made them look to Griffoner. Rimuru Tempest remained unaware of the theological schism he was creating. He was busy planning the next harvest. He was busy fixing the plumbing in the capital. He believed he had bought a year of peace. He was wrong. He had bought an era of scrutiny. The eyes of the warp were wide open. The silence of the Necrons was a held breath. The hunger of the Tyranids was a dull ache that would return. The chronicle of the slime had become a legend. The Federation stood as a lighthouse in the storm. But lighthouses do not just guide ships to safety. They also show the monsters where the shore is. The 41st millennium ended in blood and fire. The 42nd millennium began with a handshake between a machine and a monster. The game had changed. The pieces were different. But the war never changes. It just waits for the next turn. And in the center of the board, the Blue King waited, ready to roll the dice against the gods themselves.